I have the privilege of introducing our speaker today, and actually even more of his family. I hope you get to meet his wife as well today. But we have our missionary from Tanzania with us, and it's been a few years. How many years did we figure it out? Maybe 5? More than that? Wow. A lot, more than 5. So Steve and Susan Vinton founded Village Schools International, and I met them in about 2005. I was trying to figure out, I was sitting in a little church plant in Dallas, and this guy came and talked about, he just shared that there was this country that at the time, after 3rd grade, only a very low percentage of kids got to go to school. And I just couldn't believe that. How does that even happen? And of course, on top of that, the ones that are going to get to go to school aren't going to be the girls, right? I didn't know I was going to have 4 girls after that. But it was heartbreaking, but it was really cool to see what God was doing, because these guys were going around to little villages, because those are the ones that were getting left out. And they would start schools, and they would tell the people in the villages, if you guys want to make the bricks, which we're talking about 250,000 bricks, right, to make a school probably, mud bricks. Say, if you make these, then I'll come put a roof on it for you, and then I'll talk to my friends in America and try to get someone to educate you. And it's done awesome. How many kids are in your schools right now? 13,000 kids. That wouldn't have got a chance. So you can kind of change a country like that, actually, when you start to educate kids. And the stories are, if you've been following the last few years, that when their kids come through village schools, they actually even score higher than the kids that went to the government schools who were selected special to go. And it's just taken off what God has done in Tanzania and also in Malawi and Zambia now. But there's also another problem going on there with kind of an HIV. Would they call that a pandemic? Is that the correct word? And so his wife Susan is able to take these drugs to people and keep them alive, so that there are less orphans, and people can grow up and hear about Jesus and then be there for their kids. And so there's a lot that goes into VSI. You could not even scratch the surface in the next few minutes that we're going to try to do. But if you want to hear more about it, we have a lot of avenues to do that. And Steve's background is very unique, and so is Susan's. And for Steve in particular, being in the Congo, and his grandfather who planted hundreds of churches and schools there, but then they had to flee. Was it 2000, the year 2000? Do you remember what year? 99, because of a conflict. So refugee fleeing into neighboring country of Tanzania and wondering what in the world God's going to do. And now God showed them what to do. And I've always just really appreciated their work there, because I can tell you what the finances look like, and it's pretty amazing. I've never seen anything like it. They live like the people live, and the place is self-sustaining. They've got nationals running the thing, which is what it should look like, in my opinion, if you can do that, right? And so it's really awesome. And they get to come back every so often. They recently got to see the rest of their family for the first time in 2 years. COVID's thrown a lot of wrenches into everybody's lives, and so they were supposed to come last year, and because of that, it got pushed back. And so this week has been a long time coming, and we're so excited to have them. It's been a lot of years, and so I'm going to turn this over to Steve, and he's going to come bring our message this morning. If you'd please welcome Steve Vinton.
It was just a couple weeks ago that Susan and I left Tanzania, and it's a great privilege for us to get to come here and be with you this morning, and we're thankful for it. No, what Jay didn't mention is that when he listened to me speak that in that little church there, he decided not to come to Africa himself, but he took his sister out. And his sister lived in a little village for a whole year. And she taught kids at the bottom to give them a chance, to share her faith with them, to share her life with them. And the result has been that we have a really special relationship with their whole family. I'm really thankful that we get to come and be with you here today. But the truth is that the real reason we wanted to come after we came back from Tanzania is we get to spend a couple days with Jay's folks, who are just like the nicest people in the world. And to get to come and be with them is a real privilege. To get to come and spend this morning with you is special also. You folks have been very, very generous. You have helped and partnered with a work that my wife and I believe God has called us to do in Africa. And we haven't been able to come here and express our appreciation for what you have done. And so today is a good morning for us because we want to come and say thank you. And we want to try and give you a glimpse of the joy that we have been able to have in our lives of seeing what God is doing there in Africa. You know, when Jay alluded to the fact that we had to leave Congo, we left a place where my grandparents had gone in 1928 to take the gospel to people who had never heard the name of Jesus before. We left a country where my wife and I had met. She had come out to Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer. She went to a little village. I was in another little village. She wandered into my village. I wasn't stupid. She was beautiful, and so I followed her back to America, and we got married, and we were going to live happily ever after in Washington, D.C. We had good jobs, and we went to a good church, and we had good friends, and we enjoyed and loved our lives there. And then we took a course. It's called the Perspectives course. Some of you might have heard about it. It's sharing what God is doing all around the world. And God used that course to cause us to quit our jobs. And we took off. I can do whatever you tell me to do. I do that. Is that, can you hear me? A little higher. Okay, good. All right. We went off to Africa because we wanted to take the gospel also to people who hadn't heard. God used that time that we were in Congo, and we saw the power of what he could do through the young people that we had worked with when we were teachers. God used them to start churches, to get clinics started, to start other schools. God did wonderful things, and we were witnesses to it. And then there was a war, and in that great whirlwind of war that, we read about, that 4 million people got killed. Millions of other people ended up as refugees. And Susan and I ended up in the neighboring country of Tanzania. And when we were there, we were introduced to a whole new Africa. We were introduced to a place that wasn't like what we had seen in Congo, where the gospel had gone, and yes, there were over 600 churches that my grandparents planted in those villages in eastern Congo. But there were also 160 primary schools and 62 high schools. There were hospitals, there were medical clinics, there were all kinds of projects to help poor people get out of poverty because the church was involved in changing everyone's life. Everywhere the gospel went, it changed everything. And suddenly we're plopped into this place in Tanzania You can't start a medical clinic because there's no one who's gone beyond the 7th grade. Susan and I, we're going to help out at this little Bible school that these missionaries had there. I couldn't believe it. I walk in the first day to train pastors. Not one of them had been beyond the 7th grade. Susan comes home at the end of the first day. She had been working with their wives. Half of them couldn't read and write. This was the world we were in. And sometimes as Christian people, you look at something and you say, it just should not be this way. This is wrong. And it doesn't matter if the whole rest of the world doesn't care. As Christian people, we have to care and we have to do something about it. You know, when I first went out to Africa, it was so long ago. I am there in the village with my grandparents, and it was in the days before computers. There was no email. There were no... My grandfather had an old typewriter. That really dates me. But someone had sent my grandfather a photocopy machine. In the middle of the jungle, he had a photocopy machine. And the thing that he did is he took paper and he printed out, and he was always writing these letters to people, but at the top there was this letterhead. And it was an incredible thing because it had his picture on the left, and it had my grandmother's picture on the right. And in the middle, it said in Swahili, Sisi ni wafanyakazi pamoja na Mungu. It was taken from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9, and it said, we are co-laborers together with God. All these letters that he wrote to people, everybody was so excited because it didn't matter where the village was, they could see their pictures at the top. And there was that message, we are co-laborers together with God. That is something, I don't write on pieces of paper like that anymore with my students. But what I've tried to communicate to them is that those of us who are called to be his children, those of us who experience salvation in Christ, we are co-laborers together with God. God is doing something wonderful on this planet, on the whole big planet, but he's also doing something wonderful right in our neighborhoods and in our villages and the places where we live. God is at work doing things, and it's a family business. Those of us who are in the family, we're co-laborers together with him. A lot of that working with God is just us being us. But sometimes God gives us also tools to use. So really date me. But soon after, when I started being a missionary in Congo, we were all excited because Campus Crusade for Christ had produced a film. It was called the Jesus Film. Some of you who are really old like me, you might remember that thing. It was a wonderful tool because, you know, to read the New Testament, especially if you're with people who can't read, but even people who can, you know how long it takes to read it all? But there it was in 2 hours, you could see it. And you could introduce people to Jesus and they could see it. It was a beautiful tool. You know, all these years, it's been used by countless missionaries all around the world. There are so many people who have seen that film, who have been introduced to Jesus and what he did and who he was and the words that he spoke by watching that film. I never thought there would be another tool that would come out, you know. It's like it's that timeless thing. Some of you might have heard of this thing that like kids watch on apps now, I guess, or whatever. It's called The Chosen. Have any of you seen it? Susan and I were introduced to it a couple months ago. You know, it's an incredible thing because unlike the Jesus film that is 2 hours and that is all about Jesus, The Chosen is about the people that Jesus chose. And you learn about Jesus through learning about their stories. You know, I can read for you Luke chapter 5. I can read the first 11 verses. And we can read there about Simon. And you know, I'm going to read it for you. Luke chapter 5. Starting in verse 1. It says, "One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats, left there by fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. And then he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, 'Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch.' And Simon answered, 'Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets.' And when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. And so they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both boats so full that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' feet and said, 'Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man.' For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. And then Jesus said to Simon, 'Don't be afraid. From now on, you will be fishers of men.' And so they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him." You know, you can read the 11 verses. But I tell you, when I turned on the video and I had my students watch, and they watched Simon go out and fish all night. You know, the poor know what it's like to go fishing and to catch nothing. The poor know what it's like to work in their fields and for the rains not to come. The poor know what it's like to be given a job and to be told that you will be paid at the end of the month and to not be paid. The poor live with that all the time. And they watch and they see that Simon is tired all night. And they feel the pain of being tired. And then when Jesus says to do the incredible thing, to put the nets back in the water, the poor know what it's like to just have no strength in you left. And they see Simon put the nets in the water. And then the nets fill up with fish that they can't even pour it into the boats. He has to call his friends and they push it all in. And they see Simon fall on his knees before Jesus and say, I'm a sinful man. And they see the incredible thing when Jesus says, follow me. And you're not going to fish anymore for fish. You're going to go, you're going to be a fisher of men. It's an incredibly powerful scene. What I want to share with you this morning is that those 11 verses, they're not just something that happened 2,000 years ago. I want you to understand what your church has chosen to be involved in when you said you wanted to partner with this work off in Africa. I want to share with you some things that Susan and I saw in just the last couple months. And I want to do that because I hope in doing it, that a little bit of the joy and happiness that Susan and I feel with the privilege that we get to be there in Africa and to see this, I hope that you will get a little glimpse of it. And that you will feel a little bit of what we feel. Because you see, just as Simon was called to be a fisher of men, so we see that these students that we have worked with for these last 15 years now, that God has also called them and is using them. You know, it sounds so easy for me to say that we have 54 schools now. Schools are not created just by opening a little packet and adding water and it instantly happens. The making of bricks, it is so much work. A strong man can work all day and maybe he can make 200 or maybe 250 bricks. To make the bricks to build a school, this takes hundreds, thousands of people to work. It is incredible what it takes. But it's not also that a person gets up today and someone decides to start making bricks. That's what I got to see in July. You see, when we were out there, Godfrey and Emanuele, they took me in the car and we went to the village of Mapanda together. They told me of why we were going to Mapanda. You see, there was a kid from Mapanda who got to go to school, not because there was a school in his village. He left his village. He left his mother. His father was already dead. He left his mother. He came all the way to our school there at Madisi, where Susan and I live. He was among the kids known as the unchosen ones. He finished the 7th grade. He took the national exams. He was smart. He wanted to go to school. Not one kid in his village was chosen. And his mother gathered up what she had, and she sent that kid to go all the way to our village to come to school. When she came and visited her son, she saw the school, she listened to how the school had been built. As they told us when we got to the village, she returned back to that village and she would not stop talking. She would not stop. Why can't we build a school like those people built a school? Why can't we make bricks like those kids made bricks? Then everybody will get to go to school, not just my son, but everyone. And they called us there to that village. And I got to see Godfrey and Emanuele stand up in front of the huge crowd of people and tell them the story of their lives. Godfrey, who stood up and said, I also was not chosen. I come from the village of Nankanga. The year that I graduated from primary school, not one of us got chosen to go to school. Emanuele told the story of his life. He told about how I saw him the day he was carrying beans on the back of his bicycle to take them 45 kilometers into town so he could sell his beans. He doesn't haul beans anymore. He went to school. It was wonderful for me to sit there and listen and then have all of the questions that people asked. But the one big question, they asked a lot of, so how many bricks do we have to make? What about the stones? How will we get all the foundation stone? But then somebody asked the question of Godfrey. Why do you do this? It's a good question. We had hours. And you know what Godfrey did? He told them that when he was a student, that he remembered that there was a day in chapel when I taught them from the 12th chapter in Genesis. Flip in your Bibles and go back there, the 12th chapter of Genesis. This is where things are all beginning with God's people. And Godfrey quoted these verses. Genesis chapter 12. It says in verse 1, the Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's house, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. And Godfrey said, it never would leave my mind afterwards that the reason we were blessed was so that we could be a blessing. He said it wasn't about me getting to go to school, and then I would go off to the university, and then I would make a better life for myself. I kept remembering that the reason I was blessed was so that others would be blessed, that I could be used to bring blessing to them. As a teacher, to sit there and listen to your student talk about things that you said 20 years ago. I'm sad here in America the way we don't recognize the value that teachers have. I love being in Africa where people value teachers. Blessed to be a blessing. It's not simply about us. And that's how I got to see the beginnings of what will be a new school in the village of Mapan. Because Godfrey has spent the last 16 years of his life going to all of these villages with the same message. If you're willing to make bricks and haul stones and sand and water, I believe God will provide the metal roofing and the cement, and one day all your kids will get to go to school. And you know, I know because I also was skeptical. When Godfrey and Emanuele came and said they had this dream that they were going to start Village Schools Tanzania. And we worked out in the spreadsheet, you know, if they started one school the first year and then, you know, later on ramp up and do 2 a year and then 3. At the end of 20 years, they'd have 56 schools. You know, if I were planning to do this, well, this is the kind of thing that you go off and you find, you know, like the big foundations, and you go and get a bunch of very qualified people with master's degrees and stuff like this, and you go out and you make this big plan. There's a reason why people run away from doing this. Because it's scary even to think of. And who does God choose? A couple of kids from villages who weren't ever supposed to get to go to school themselves, who get the chance and then decide that because we've been blessed, we need to be a blessing to others. And today they have 54 schools. After 16 years, they're spread in villages, 9 regions of their country, and it's spilled over into the countries of Malawi and Zambia, and it just got started in Uganda. Fishers of men. Yes, Maggie, Jay's sister, was among the early ones to come out. We've had over 210 missionaries who have left the United States and Canada to do exactly what Maggie did, to go into all these schools that these people build and go and make those villages their home and to live with those people. It's a beautiful thing. And you know, all those years back when Susan and I felt God was calling us to leave our jobs in Washington, D.C., so that the gospel might go into the hard places, we found out how to get the gospel into the hard places. You go to villages and you tell kids that you want to give them a chance, and you tell their parents that you're willing to live with them, and you want to teach those kids. After I came back from that trip, and you know, I don't know if that'll be school number 63 or, you know, what, I don't know which, because it takes, some villages it takes a whole year of making bricks, some villages it's 6 months, some it's 2 years. You know, I don't know how long it'll take those people before their kids get to go to school. But you know, I come back and Susan and I are going on a walk. We live in the most beautiful place. You know, it's in the middle of nowhere. But it's beautiful. And we're going on our walk, and Susan has worked all day having her fun. Having her fun because, you know, that little thing that started out with helping people who were sick with we didn't even know what it was. That little thing has blossomed into this big, beautiful AIDS clinic now that was built by our students. After they built classrooms and built houses for teachers, then they built an AIDS clinic that today helps 1,208 people who have AIDS. Musafiri is our former student. He runs that clinic. The person who helps him the most, Dikta, is the first girl from our area and her family to get to go to school. She finished and she went away. And now she's come back to help people who are desperately sick. But that day when we're walking, you know what we see? We're coming back. And here is a van, and Musafiri, the guy who runs the clinic, is driving the van. And this is after all day, when Susan has been working with Musafiri, the chaplain at our school, all of these volunteers who have come, and they have put on a special day of wonderful activities for all the kids who have AIDS. It's like a vacation Bible school on steroids condensed into one day. It's this wonderful day for all of them. Susan's tired, but she's excited telling me about it. And we walked into the forest, and then we're coming back, and we see the van, and there's Musafiri driving the van, and he rolls down the window, and I look in, and the car is full of kids. It's not like in America where everyone has to have a seatbelt, you know? In Africa, there's always room for one more. And, you know, and I'm not kidding. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I look back into the sea of kids. There's probably 20 kids in that van. Why were they in the van? Because before the day started, Musafiri had gone with the van to go and get the kids who were really, really far away. And now it was 6 o'clock at night, and everything is finished, and he's taking all those kids that he went to go get, and he's taking them home. You know, it wasn't the time to talk with Musafiri in front of all the kids who needed to get home. But I had to call Musafiri afterwards and talk with him. And you know, I read to him that day from Psalm 68. Psalm 68, in verse 4, it says, "Sing to God, sing praise to his name, extol him who rides on the clouds. His name is the Lord, and rejoice before him. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows." And I said, you know, Safiri, God is the father to the fatherless, but it's not because God sends angels down here to take care of all these kids. You know, they call my wife the mother of many. And that's, you know, he calls her mama. And I said, you know, Musafiri, mama is the mother of many. And what I saw of you in the car today is you're the father of many. We had a great conversation because Musafiri reminded me of everything. You know, Musafiri was raised by his grandparents because both his mother and his father died. Musafiri also was a kid who was not chosen to get to go to school. The year he finished primary school, they chose 2 kids from his village. He wasn't one of them. But he reminded me that it was Mama who walked all the way from Mumba to go to his village of Musanda, and went to the house of his grandparents and who got Musafiri and brought Musafiri to school. And so, as Musafiri said, how can I not do what was done for me? So Musafiri runs a clinic that is different from all other clinics because you see, at all other clinics, you wait for sick people to come. But what makes this clinic so different is that Musafiri and his staff, they go out and they find the people who are sick. They visit people in their homes. They take medicine to those who are sick. They go out fishing. While we were there this summer, it would have been enough to go with Godfrey and Emanuele to that village of Mapanda. For me, it would have been enough to see Musafiri and to talk with him. But you know, the world has changed now in Tanzania. It's not just that we show up at people's doors and we eat food and talk with them. We're now in the land of wonderful telephones, you know. And I can call on the phone. And you know, it's like I haven't seen Justin for so long. You know, let me just call him. You know where Justin was the day I called him? He had gone down the escarpment with 13 other teachers. I called him just to say hi. What I heard was that he and the 13 other teachers, they had 3 cars. They go to a village, he'd drop one person off, he'd go to the next village, and then at the last village, when he had the car then, he would go to the market. And he'd talk with people and find out who are the kids who aren't in school. Who are the kids who finished 2 years ago and had no place to go? And he'd get all the names, and then he'd get somebody in the market there who would take him. And he'd go house to house. We have a school. I listened to it all. He'd do that the whole day, and then he'd drive the car back and pick up in each village the teacher that he had dropped off. When I got to see Justin and I talked with him about it, he reminded me of how I had gone to his village. You see, I remember the day that Justin dropped out of school. Justin had come to school, but life was hard. Life is hard for the kids on the bottom, and it had just gotten too hard. You can just go so long with not eating enough. And it's so many years until you finish. And you can give up. He was right. I showed up in his village. And I went to his house. And I told him to get into the car. And we laughed about it because he said, I told you that I wanted to go and get my clothes, that I would come and you wouldn't let me get my clothes. He said somebody would send the clothes afterwards. And it was true. I didn't let him get his clothes because I was afraid if he got his clothes, he'd go out the back door and they wouldn't get him. And so Justin goes now, and he goes and he looks for the kids. You know, there is a wonderful thing about doing chapel with kids for all those years. They quote things back to you. Let me share with you the verse that he read to me. This is from Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19. Verse 10. This is when Jesus has been with Zacchaeus. And Jesus, in verse 9 it says, Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost." Jesus came to seek and to save. This is what Justin had quoted the day that all the headmasters had met. And they made this pact, it was several years ago, that they would go out and seek out the kids. This is what Justin, every time we have a big meeting of all the new teachers, that we say, your job is not simply to go into the classroom and teach geography. Or even to say, my job is to teach Bible knowledge. Or to teach physics. Your job is not simply to teach. Your job first is to go out and get those students. Find the kids who are not chosen. The kids who 2 and 3 years ago gave up because there was no school for them. And they have no more hope. You go, you argue with their parents. You convince them that they can do it. You know, you have to understand, we're talking about parents who have been told that your kid is not good enough to go. They took the exams and your kid didn't make the grade. You see, the schools, there's only enough. When those kids finish the 7th grade, there's only enough classrooms, there's only enough desks in the country to take the straight A students. But the fact is there's lots of people in the world who make B's and C's. And even kids who get D's and F's, it's not that they're dumb. But whatever it is, it shouldn't be over for a kid at the 7th grade. Everybody should get to keep on going. But to go and tell a parent, you know, it was 2 years ago that your kid had C's and D's and so didn't get chosen to get to go to government school. But we've got teachers who will teach your kid. We've got teachers who will work really hard with your kid. You know, I will be honest with you folks. When this whole thing started, I was scared that we'd bring all these kids in, we'd work hard with them, and then when they'd have to take that test, the national test, the test from the government, that it's like, I went yesterday and watched a great softball game. And you know, I mean, they played well. But you know, to have a play major leagues is just not fair, you know? And that's all I could see. I could see, you know, I mean, these are the kids who weren't chosen. They're not making the grades. The government school has all the straight A kids. And when they take national exams, only 40% of them pass. So what's it supposed to be for these kids? You know, and I still remember when I went to go see the head government guy, and I said, you know, can we just get a waiver? You know, we just want the kids to stay in school. You know, I mean, we're taking the kids who everybody says have no chance. We just want to keep them in school. And you know, and you said, that's the thing with you missionaries. It's always about grace, grace, love, and all that. You know, the law is the law. They have to take the test, and if they don't pass, they're out. You can't keep them in school. You know, so we bring them in for the 8th and the 9th grade, and then they have to take a test, and they have to be weeded out. It's like, it doesn't seem fair. And you know what? The first year we did it, we had 100% of the kids pass. And then the second year, we had 100%. And you know, we've been doing this now, these 16 years, cumulatively, we've had 98% of these kids pass. I have to imagine that God is just chuckling over it, you know, I mean, and I love getting to see it, but you know, there is something when you get teachers who will it into those kids. And there is something about being told that you don't get to go to school and then you get the second chance. They work hard. You know, this last year was a really hard year. You know, in America, when COVID hit and things, we had computers and, you know, I mean, I don't know what kids did. We did all kinds of special things here in America. We don't have that kind of thing in Africa. It just happened one day. The government announced, it was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they just announced that all the schools in the country had to close. And all the kids had to go home. And for 3 months, the schools were just closed. Well, imagine now when we're trying to always play catch up, you know, we're the schools where our kids come for extra class in the morning at 6, and where we have classes at night, because we know we're at the bottom and we have to try harder. Imagine now when you have 3 months where there's nothing. And there's no Zoom class. I don't even know what all we did here in America. There's nothing like that. At the government schools, 14% of the kids score high enough to get to go on to college. When our results came out this year, it wasn't just that we had 99% of the kids pass. 68% of them scored so high they get to go on to college. Yeah. And while we're here today, there are 144 new teachers who just spent 2 weeks at a seminar there in Tanzania. They finished on Friday. They have gone out. They are using the next 2 weeks to go out to villages. They have the goal of enrolling 2,800 new students. They're going to go find them, so that on September 13th, we will bring 2,800 more kids into school. They're going to go out and find them. You know how they're going out? On one hand, they're saying, look at the results of all of these other kids. But on the other hand, they're going out and they're saying, we not only believe all the boys should come, but also all the girls should come. And you know, everybody in Tanzania knows what it costs to go to school. It doesn't sound like a lot in America. It's $800, maybe $900, $1,000, $1,100. That's to go for poor people. That might as well be $1 million. They can't afford that. And then it's to send your kid away to the city. But instead, they go out and tell them it's $110. But for the girls, it's only $35. Why? because we're Christian people. And we're going to help the kids at the bottom. And the kids who are really at the bottom, it's the girls. And we're going to get every single girl in school that we can. You know, my friends, I am thrilled for every school that has been started. I am thrilled for every kid who is there. I am thrilled for every missionary that we have sent. I am thrilled for every college student in Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, who comes and gives of themselves to teach in these schools. We've got over 600 Tanzanians, Malawians, and Zambians teaching in these schools. I am thrilled for all of them. All of those numbers I am thrilled about. But what makes me the happiest this morning is of those nearly 14,000 kids that we have, 54% of them are girls. We succeeded. We did this as Christian people. We got the girls in school. You know, when Jesus shares in Matthew 25, you know, let's take a minute and read it. It's so good. In Matthew chapter 25, in Matthew chapter 25, verse 35, Jesus is sharing with them and he says this, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." And in verse 37 it says, "And then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' And the king will reply, 'I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me.'" Well, my friends, in the country where I live in Tanzania, the least of these are girls in villages. They're the ones at the absolute bottom. When Jesus told Simon, "You will be fisher of men," well, he told all of our teachers, "You're going to be fishers of little girls." Get them and bring them in. That's what you've helped be a part of. You know, we saw a whole lot this summer. The best is still yet to come. On September 28th, this year in all of our schools, they're going to be doing what they did last year and the year before and the year before that. They're going to be having what they call a Harambee. It means that all those kids on September 28th, they're going to be collecting money in all the schools. It's not to make their schools better. They're giving money to start new schools. Those 144 teachers who are going out, they're going to lots of old schools, but they're going to 3 new villages where there are new schools. Now, I'll be honest with you. The money that they're going to collect is not a lot of money. Last year it was 12 million shillings, which is a little bit over $5,000. Those kids, when they give that money, the 500 shillings or the 1,000 shillings, it isn't going to buy a sack of cement. In fact, I don't even know if it's going to buy a cup of cement. But they do this in great faith. You know, if they did it in order to make even their own schools better, I would applaud them. But they are applying the same principle that Godfrey applied when he goes to a new village. We are blessed to be a blessing. They have chosen to take a passage. I will close by reading this for you. It's from 2 Corinthians chapter 8. It starts in the first verse and it says, "And now, brothers, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Out of the most severe trial, their overwhelming joy and their extreme poverty has welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints." Whatever it is that we have done as God's people here in America to send out missionaries out there to Africa to work in these villages, whatever we have done to help get things started out there, we can now look and see the fruit of what the gospel has produced in the lives of those people. They are, by any stretch of the imagination, poor. It does not matter what standards you use. They are poor. For them to collect and to give, it is not out of their excess. It is real sacrifice. Just like there when Paul said, out of their extreme poverty has welled up generosity. That is what all of these years has produced in their lives. As the gospel has touched them and their parents, what it has produced in them is no longer looking at what they can receive, but it's looking at what they can give. It's produced people like Godfrey and Emanuele. It's produced people like Musafiri. It's produced people like Justin. And it's produced people like all of these kids now who look out and say, we hope one day other kids will get to go to school like we have. They have a tremendous goal. In this decade, they want to start 60 more schools. 60 more. If they do it, we won't have almost 14,000 kids in school. At the end of the decade, we'll have almost 30,000. Every single one of those kids is important to God. I say again to all of you, you have helped us so much. You've partnered in this work. I want to ask you to do one more thing. This paper will share with you 3 things that we need people to pray about. The first is that we need to pray for more workers. They're going to start more and more schools. Every school they start, we need teachers. We are so thankful for the 200 missionaries who come. We need more in this next decade. We need people to pray for open doors, to get into these villages. Yes, we do believe it's very powerful having a woman go back and talk with everyone in her village. But God in their hearts to get those people to be willing to do all of this work. And we need people to pray for discernment for these leaders. These works in these countries are being led by people who believe they have a call from God. But the world would look over at all of them and say they're not qualified to do this. They're just kids from villages. How dare they think they can do something like this? You've helped us so much. But now I ask you to do more. I go back to what I saw at the top of the letterhead from my grandparents. We are co-workers together with God. I ask you to be co-workers together with God in this thing that He is doing amongst the poor in villages in Africa. If you pick this up afterwards, I'd be grateful. Let's pray together. Father, I pray that you would do a work in our hearts today. I pray that you would cause us to see the need that is all around us. Help us to see that we can be your co-workers right here in our neighborhoods, but also all around the world. For I pray in Jesus'